You asked, so I'm doing it. I'm Jack, this is Red Book Joy, and today I'm going to tell you all of the books that I did not finish in the past 12 months or so. I was recently talking about DNFs, did not finish, that's what that stands for, DNF books. Mentioned briefly in a video whether it would be something people would like, because I don't really talk about them on here. I tend to, I want to recommend books that I loved rather than slate books that I didn't enjoy, or what's the point of me but sometimes it is useful to know about a book that some people didn't finish, especially if you're someone who think I've got a similar taste to this booktuber. So I'm going to go through them all. Now there are 27 books on this list, and I'm going to caveat it by saying, as I shouldn't have to, but I do have to, because people just get really upset when you start talking about books that they love and you didn't necessarily enjoy enough to finish. I'm going to caveat it by saying reading is subjective, we all know that. There are plenty of books that I love that other people don't. I don't think any less of the person for not liking a book that I loved. So I hope people will be kind, especially because a couple of books on here are very well loved on BookTube, just weren't for me. And there are a number of reasons I DNF. I've become less tolerant the older I get of just not having a great time with the book. I don't just want to have an okay time, I want to have a great time. And I really seek out brilliant reading experiences now. When I was younger and I read far more and I had no concept of how little time there is in life, I would just read a book, even if it was just a good book. It's good, it's not terrible, it's not great, I would finish it. Now I have less tolerance for that. And I'm going to split this into two categories. There are books that I have not finished yet that I really want to go back to, and there are books that I'm just may go back to, and then there are books that I'm definitely not going to go back to. We're going to get into it. I'm not going to go through it chronologically. Like I said, I'm splitting it up into books that I may go back to and books that I will go back to, or I definitely am aiming to go back to, and then books that I'm just done with. I've got 27 books on this list. There may be more that I've forgotten because I went onto Storygraph and only 9 of them were on Storygraph, because sometimes I start a book and I don't get to put it on Storygraph before I've gone, actually it's not for me. So I went through all of my library reading records and my Storygraph and a few other things just to make sure I got everything that I hadn't finished written down here. There are sort of books that I will have forgotten as well, because there may be some physical books that I've started and put down. I've got a pile of books over there that I'm going to be donating or getting rid of, that there may be some in there as well. But I didn't want to go through everything because this is going to be a long video otherwise. I'm not going to necessarily talk about every single book at length, because that is just going to take too long. And yeah, if it's a particular book, BookTube darling or whatever, I may talk about it a bit longer. We'll see. So first of all, books that I DNF-wide, did not finish yet, as in I want to go back to these. I'm going to go through them. The first one is Shakespeare by Bill Bryson. I have reread, this was a reread for me, and I started it in September. Quite a few books that I was reading around the end of the academic year and the beginning of the academic year had to be put to one side because I have lots of essays to mark, or I have some reading to do because I've got set texts that my students are studying that I also need to read. So yeah, so some things are just put aside because I just don't have the time. So, and that was one of them. I wanted to read it for September and I loved it previously, and I am going to go back to it at some point. Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. Again, this is a great book all about how different mediums convey information. And this was initially, this was about the way that television conveys information. And the whole idea of the medium is the message, which isn't Neil Postman. That's, I can't remember the guy's name. But the idea of the way that messages are conveyed, the way that information is conveyed, changes our perception of it. Very fascinating, especially in this age of the internet. So I will go back to that at some point. Just had too much on reading other things. The Dress Diary of Mrs. Anne Sykes. This looked like a fascinating book all about a Victorian woman's dress diary, where she kept swatches of all of the materials that she used and the costs of them and where they come from and what clothes she had made out of them. Very fascinating social history, and it just went back to the library before I got a chance to finish it. So at some point I've got it on hold again, and I keep suspending the hold. I keep letting the next person in line have it, because every time it crops up I'm just too busy. But I do want to read that book. Very fascinating. Nettle and Bone by Kingfisher. I started listening to it and I think I fell asleep in the middle of the night and meant to go back to where I was, and I just didn't, but I will go back to it because I like Kingfisher. An Instance of the Fingerpost by Iain Pears. This is a historical fiction novel set in 17th century Oxford about a murder told from 4 different perspectives. It's a very cleverly written book, very well written book, and you need to pay attention, and I wasn't paying enough attention, so I need to go back and give it my full undivided attention. I read about half of it as well. It's about 600 pages. Dungeon Crawler Carl. I started it. I wasn't in the mood for it. I will go back to it. Code Dependent, Autocracy Inc. and The Story of a Heart. These were all Women's Prize for Non-Fiction nominees. Code Dependent is about AI, and Autocracy Inc. is about the autocrats that are springing up all over the world. So that was kind of terrifying. I stopped listening to that because it was just a bit much at the beginning of the year when everything was going on with various political things were going on in the real world, and I just was like, I can't read this right now, but I will because I think it's important. The Story of a Heart is about a heart transplant on the NHS. I started it, and at the start of the book it had a spoiler for a book I was about to read, so I stopped, but I will go back to it. Code Dependent, I can't remember why I stopped reading it. I think it wasn't quite what I was expecting it to be, but I think I need to give it more of a chance. It's about AI and how it's changing our lives. Fortnight in September by R.C. Sheriff. This I was really enjoying. I was reading it on holiday, and I came back to a pile of work, marking, set text to read. I just had to put it down, but I will go back to it. God and Anatomy. I picked this up as part of Gareth from Book Songs and Other Magics, a bi-monthly belief and behaviour book club, and this is all about the body of God, the Judeo-Christian God, and how the anatomy of God has been described from the earliest recorded mentions of that God. So it's not a religious book, but it's a kind of sociological look at how that has impacted our view of our bodies in the countries in the world where like Judaism, Islam, Christianity have been dominant, and how that affects us socially. Very fascinating premise, and I would like to go back to it, but it was massive and I had to return it to the library. I'd read about 3 chapters of it. Books I may go back to. Outland by Jenny Fagan, another Women's Prize for Non-Fiction book. I DNF'd this for a very specific reason. It's one of those non-fiction memoirs where I understand that memoir is not 100% literal truth, because it is people's memories, and memories are unreliable. And also memoir has to be written in a kind of fictionalised account in a sense, the way it's told, because, you know, we can't remember everything that well. So we might, embellish it somewhat. But I really dislike when non-fiction memoir or biography of another person writes about it to such detail, as if they were there, as if they're telling you it in such minute detail and imagining it like a very but it's a fictionalized account of something they couldn't possibly know. I find that I don't like it. And the start of the story, she's talking about her growing up in foster care and the care system, and the start of the story is her mother giving birth to her, and the level of detail she goes into, it's like, no, sorry. But I may go back to it. I think I've read a memoir recently where someone did that, where they wrote about other people's lives that they couldn't possibly know this level of detail at, but the writing was so good I really enjoyed it. So maybe I'm being harsh. Who knows? Sarum by Edward Rutherford. I had to DNF this because sometimes I just DNF things. 1, because I'm not in the mood, or because 2, I've got something big and shiny and new that comes along that I really want to read. So that was the case with this. This, though, it's a very interesting type of historical fiction, Edward Rutherford, because he writes about the history of a place and over generations and generations, and actually like from prehistory right through to modern day, and each chapter jumps forward in time, and so we follow characters that are descendants of the ones from the previous chapters. So I like the premise because I love the idea of the passage of time in a place. And Sarum is the name for Salisbury, so where Stonehenge is and things like that. So he talks about I got to the sort of Roman period, which is about here. So his book is like 1,000 and something pages. Yeah, it's 1,200, nearly 1,400 pages, I think. And I was really into it when I started it, but I suspected because each chapter skips forward and we have new characters that I would be a little bit put off by that, because I'm not a short story person. I like a novel length piece of fiction, and whilst we are following the place, the people are changing each time. So it's kind of like a series of short stories connected by a place rather than a novel. So yeah, I hope to go back to that one. I hope to go back to that one at some point, because I find the idea fascinating, really. And the writing's very good. I think a lot of people love his books, and I can see why. I really enjoyed his writing. Now, books that I will not go back to. Please don't come at me for this. Again, sometimes it's just that I can see it's a good book, just not for me. It's not either holding my interest, or I suddenly realise I'm not enjoying this, and I don't just read for enjoyment. I do read to learn. However, I also need to be compelled to read it, and sometimes I just realise I'm not compelled to read something if I'm not picking it up. I have to suddenly have a little question about it. Why am I not enjoying this? I'm not enjoying it, and then I put it down. So, Starter Villain by John Scalzi. John Scalzi is a very popular sci-fi writer, and I've read one other book by him which I thought was okay, and that was Lock In. I read that many years ago. And Starter Villain, great premise about someone who inherits their uncle's evil empire. His uncle turns out to have been a supervillain, and it's just like really funny. I think the premise is really great. The dialogue doesn't work for me. Scalzi's dialogue for me in that book just felt like it just all felt a little bit silly, and I know the idea is silly, and I can get on board with silly ideas. I love The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I love Discworld. I love silly. I just want it to. The dialogue wasn't well written for me, because it took me out of it. It made me feel like I'm reading dialogue, and I want to feel like I'm reading dialogue. I want to feel like I'm witnessing a conversation. So, not for me. Normally Weird and Weirdly Normal by Robin Ince. This is his account of being diagnosed with ADHD later in life, and how this made him have lots of realisations about why he has struggled so much in his life. And I think it's a really important book, actually. I think it's probably really important for people, especially if there are a lot of people being diagnosed later in life with different neurodivergent conditions, and I think it might answer a lot of questions for some people. I was reading it because I like Robin Ince a lot, and I was thinking about that would be an interesting story, because I'd previously read Strong Female Character by Fern Brady, and I loved that book, and she was diagnosed with autism late in life, and her book is fantastic. I started listening to it, and I realised whilst I like listening to Robin Ince on The Infinite Monkey Cage, I was less so enjoying him narrating this. I don't know why. I just was like, no, you know what, I can live without it. It's fine. But I do think it would be a really important book for a lot of people. Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I really want to give Emily Henry another go at some point. I just wasn't in the mood for this. I'm finding I really, really need to be gripped by a contemporary romance these days. I used to really enjoy a contemporary romance, especially like for a light summer read and things like that. And Emily Henry gets a lot of love on BookTube, and I think I will try another Emily Henry book. So if you've got any recommendations, stick them into the comments below. But Book Lovers I thought would be great, and I just, I don't know, I think sometimes more and more lately when I read a contemporary romance and I can see, I don't know, I just feel, if I'm not gelling with the characters, I know for some reason I just didn't gel with the characters in this one. So yeah, I have to really gel with the characters and be really gripped by the storyline or the setting. So, and sometimes romance nowadays, it has to be done well for me. I don't know what makes it something a good romance for me, but there's a lot of things that don't work for me and just make me go, So yeah, Book Lovers, it was a DNF. Whatever Happened to Margot by Margot Durrell. I started reading this because I was reading a lot about the Durrells, Gerald Durrell. I love the Durrells of Corfu, like the TV show, and I love My Family and Other Animals, one of my favourite books. And so I read a book about the Durrells, which was not brilliantly written, but I got a lot of information about them as a family. And of course, My Family and Other Animals is a memoir that is very fictionalised. So when I was talking about Ooplin earlier, this is why I think, I need to try and go back to it, because I've been a bit unfair with it, because I have read lots of memoir that isn't, no memoir is 100% accurate. But I love My Family and Other Animals, so I wanted to find out a bit more about the family, and they are a fascinating family. And there turns out Margot had written her own memoir, What Happened to Margot, and I was listening to it and then I realised I don't really care. So I stopped. The next few are Fairy Tale by Stephen King. I don't think he's a BookTube darling. I think a lot of people agreed with me on this. I love the start of Fairy Tale by Stephen King. It's the first contemporary Stephen King I'd read in a long time, and the premise sounded amazing. A boy who finds his way into a fairy tale land, and the start of the book was brilliant. I love an intergenerational friendship, and that was what happened at the start of the book. First half of the book was amazing. He goes into the fairy tale land, bored. I was so bored. It just was just weird and boring, and I didn't know where it was going, and I didn't really care, so I DNF'd it. But I read over half of it. The first half is great. Then I'm getting to the big hitters in a bit, because I think I need to talk about them at length. Annie Bot, perfectly okay premise, but I was like, yeah, I wanted to read this book. It's about perspective. Like, it's about she's basically a sex robot, and she is with the stories from her perspective. This man that sort of owns her, and I can see what it's doing, and I would have loved it years ago, but I was just like, yeah, it's an okay book. I read about half of it. It's very short. I should have probably just finished it, but I couldn't be bothered. So yeah, done. A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. I've talked about this a few times. I've tried to read it so many times. This should be my bread and butter, because I used to love a bit of urban fantasy, vampires, dark academia, witches. Oh, I should love this book. I should love it. And so many people do. And I've tried this third time I've tried to read it, and I've really given it a good go. But for me, the pacing is so off. The pacing is so slow. I'm just waiting for stuff to happen. And then these two characters are kind of like dancing around each other a little bit too much. And again, the romance aspect, you can see that I know they are going to be enamoured with each other or in a relationship at some point. I'm just like not there for it, didn't buy it, and too slow. So I'm not going back to that ever again, but I might watch the TV show if I can find it somewhere to watch. A Dark and Secret Magic. I can't remember who this book is by, but it's like I thought it would be a nice autumnal witchy read, and I think a lot of people might like it, and I don't think it's badly done. I just was like, don't really care about it actually, and also the central romance is so obvious, and I don't really care about that either, so DNF. Similarly, The Spell Shop, which is a BookTube darling by Sarah Beth Durst. I wanted cosy fantasy, and it is that. It definitely is that, but it's also got quite the romance in it was just too cringy for me. I just had to listen to her constantly, like this woman who's not interested in this man, but constantly noticing how big and tall he is and how muscular he is, and I was just like, oh no, thank you, I'm not here for that. And then the last one I want to talk about, two, and these may get me cancelled. One is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I hope I'm saying that right. Very well loved book, and it's just so much tragedy that's happening to this character, and I quite frankly didn't like any of the characters in the book. I didn't care enough to read that length of a book, and I know some of the things that happen, and I was reading it and I'm just like, how can so much happen to this one character? I just found it just a bit much and a bit unbelievable, and I really didn't enjoy or like the characters enough to continue with it. So there, A Little Life, not for me. The last one I want to mention is James by Percival Everett. Percival Everett, well loved author, and I've not yet read a Percival Everett book aside from James. I read half of it, and it's not a very long book, and I can see how important it is, and I can see how brilliantly written it is, and the concept is amazing. I think Everett does so many interesting, fascinating concepts, and I can see why it's important, and I can see why people love it. I just was reading it, and I just realised about halfway through I was just not drawn to picking it up, and I think it's just because I've never read Huckleberry. Actually, no, that's not true. I did try to read Huckleberry Finn or The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, one or the other, many years ago, and again wasn't that interested in that either. So yeah, I think that may have been the case, and I kind of wanted to see how Everett was subverting that story, but yeah, I just realised I had to admit to myself I'm not enjoying it. I don't want to read for enjoyment as well as for learning. So I know plenty of other books out there, and I just wasn't enjoying it. So don't shoot me, don't come at me about James. It's not one I'm going to go back to. I'm just not, because yeah, it's short enough. I should have finished it if I really wanted to finish it. And that's a lot of talking and a lot of books that I could have persevered with but didn't, and some that I will go back to. So tell me, any of the ones that I said I would like to go back to, let me know in the comments if you enjoyed them. I'd like to hear more about them because it will encourage me to go back to them at some point. And if you had any books that you DNF'd this year that were popular on BookTube, I'd love to hear about it. Because I don't want to feel alone in my not enjoying the popular books or the BookTube darlings out there. And if you have never been here before and you think, wow, she dislikes a lot of the books that I dislike, maybe I'll like some books that you like, in which case think about subscribing, and hopefully I will see you all again here soon. Bye.